The old sailor settled deeper into his bar stool, as if the faded cushion were the deck of the Black Star itself. The room had grown quieter around him. People who had never spoken to each other before now leaned shoulder to shoulder, drawn in by the gravity of his voice. Even the bartender paused in his wiping of glasses, tilting his head just slightly so he would not miss a word. The sailor took a slow sip of rum and began another tale. His voice had that roughened edge that only years of shouting over storms and cannons could give a man, but there was warmth in it too. A kind of fragile fondness reserved for memories that mattered. He told them about the time the Black Star drifted into a fog, so thick it swallowed the world whole. No moon, no stars, just a dense silver haze pressing against the ship like a great sleeping creature. They drifted blind for 2 days, listening to distant splashes that sounded far too heavy to be fish. The crew spoke in whispers, afraid to disturb whatever lurked beyond the rails. On the 3rd night the fog thinned just enough for their lantern light to reach the water. That was when they saw it. The calm sea was covered in thousands of glowing blue shapes drifting beneath the surface. Not fish, not jelly, something else. They moved in slow spirals, lighting up the ocean like a star map. The old sailor said he had never felt so small or so blessed. The crew stood in silence along the deck, their faces glowing in the strange blue light, as if the sea itself were letting them peek into another world. He paused to take another drink. The bar was silent except for the faint hum of an old refrigerator behind the counter. A couple sitting near the window held hands without realizing it. The sailor leaned forward a bit, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. He spoke of a storm that blew in later that same night. A sudden roar of wind that tore through the fog and sent those glowing creatures scattering like sparks. The waves rose fast, tall as buildings, slamming against the hull. The Black Star shook and groaned, and for a moment they all thought the sea had finally come to collect its debt. But Captain Marlowe had stood firm on the quarterdeck, shouting commands with the wild grin she always wore when death was close enough to smell. The old sailor said she never looked more alive than when chaos surrounded her. They battled the storm for hours, clinging to the rigging, hauling ropes with hands blistered raw, shouting to be heard over the thunder. When morning broke, the storm was gone and the sea lay flat and quiet, as if nothing had happened at all. The bar patrons exhaled as if they had been through the storm themselves. Someone muttered a soft wow. Someone else pressed a napkin to their eyes, but the sailor was not done yet. He went on to tell them about a small island they had found weeks later, one not marked on any chart. A quiet place covered in white sand that shimmered like crushed pearls. They had landed there to mend the sails and rest their weary bones. The island was empty except for a single palm tree growing out of a hill of black stone. Beneath that tree, they found carvings older than any language they knew. Spirals, waves, eyes, shapes that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. The sailor swore he felt the carvings watching him, curious and patient, as if waiting for something. He shook his head slowly, half smiling. Some places stay with you, he said, even when you try your best to forget them. The bar seemed to breathe in unison. The old sailor settled back, rolling the empty glass between his palms. He said that life on the Black Star had been hard, unpredictable, often terrifying. But it was alive in a way the land never was. Every day carried the promise of something strange and beautiful just beyond the horizon. He glanced around the bar at the faces lit with wonder, and there was a softness in his eyes. A man does not get many crews in his lifetime, he said, but sometimes on a night like this he finds one again. The patrons smiled. Some raised their glasses. The sailor nodded in quiet thanks, then ordered another rum as if he still had 1,000 stories waiting patiently in the tides of his memory. The old sailor shifted on his stool, straightened his back a little, and let a sly grin tug at the corner of his mouth. He could feel the room leaning toward him now. They wanted more, and he intended to give them exactly what they came for. After all, a man who has spent his life on the sea learns that storytelling is just another kind of navigation. You steer the crowd like you steer a ship, and tonight he was the captain again. He tapped the bar with 2 fingers, signaling for another rum, not because he needed it, but because it added the perfect touch of drama. When the bartender set the glass down, the old sailor nodded as though accepting a ceremonial offering. Then he lifted his chin and spoke with the practiced confidence of someone who knew the power of a well-timed pause. I suppose you might be wondering how a man like me ended up aboard the Black Star in the first place, he began. Most assume I was born into piracy or chased into it. But no, the Black Star chose me. A couple of younger patrons leaned in so far their elbows nearly slid off the bar. He launched into a tale of how he had once saved a merchant ship from running aground during a violent storm. He described the thunder in such vivid detail that the bar seemed to tremble. He claimed he tied himself to the wheel with nothing but a length of rope and his own stubbornness, guiding the ship to safety, while waves taller than houses shattered against the bow. The crew of that merchant ship, he said, would have crowned him king if he had asked. He paused, took a slow sip, and let the room hum with admiration before continuing. Later that same night, after guiding the ship into a moonlit harbour, he was approached by a shadowy figure wearing a cloak slick with seawater. The figure introduced herself as Captain Marlowe of the Black Star. She had seen him at the wheel during the storm and declared that any man who could stare down the sea-like that belonged on her crew. The patrons murmured with awe. Someone muttered that the man must have nerves of steel. The sailor hid his satisfied smirk behind the rim of his glass, but he was just warming up. He moved on to tales of treasure hunts where he deciphered ancient maps no one else could read. He described narrow escapes from rival pirates who chased the Black Star across 3 oceans. He told them he once fought off 6 armed boarders with nothing but a broken oar and a frying pan taken from the galley. The crowd roared with laughter when he pantomimed knocking one intruder over the railing with a sizzling skillet. Every detail was larger than life. The storms were bigger, the monsters stranger, the victories grander, his wounds more heroic. He made sure to flex a weathered hand or point to an old scar at exactly the right moment, looking just weathered enough to be believable and just theatrical enough to be unforgettable. And the audience loved him for it. Heads nodded. Mouths hung open. People sipped their drinks slowly, afraid to make a sound that might interrupt the magic spilling from his lips. They were his crew now, and he commanded their attention as easily as he once commanded the sails. Near the end of his story, he leaned in close as if sharing a truth reserved only for those who had earned it. Most men chase glory, he said, but the sea gives it freely to those bold enough to take it. And every tale I tell you tonight is a piece of the truth, maybe a polished piece, maybe shined up to catch the light, but a truth all the same. The bar erupted in applause. The old sailor grinned, basking in their admiration. In that moment he was not just an old man at a bar. He was the hero of every adventure he had ever lived and every one he had embellished. And the crowd let him shine. In the end, everyone at the bar was in awe of the old sailor's tales. They thanked him for sharing them and promised to remember them for years to come. As they left the bar, they felt inspired by his stories and eager to embark on their own adventures. The old sailor smiled as he watched them go, knowing that he had made a difference in their lives.